The French President Emmanuel Macron waits with bated breath for the result of today's elections. Polls are underway for the second round of the French parliamentary elections. It's a two-way fight between Macron's Ensemble coalition and the NUPES coalition led by leftist leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Macron cast his vote in the northern seaside town of La Touquet earlier today. He now waits for the result which will determine the success of his second term. Macron needs his coalition to win more than 289 seats in the 577-member National Assembly. Opinion polls predicted he would win the most seats, but there is no guarantee he will get the needed amount. His opponent is Jean-Luc Mélenchon. The leftist leader cast his vote in Marseille. Mélenchon hopes the results will propel him to the post of Prime Minister. Mélenchon's policies are opposed to Macron's. While Macron wants to raise the retirement age in France, Mélenchon wants to reduce it. Macron wants to reform pensions. Mélenchon wants to increase the minimum wage. If Mélenchon becomes Prime Minister, he will be the first from an opposition party since 1997. This situation is known as cohabitation. Macron wants to avoid this because it could lead to legislative deadlock. Macron needs a friendly parliament to go forward with his agenda. Another major player keeping a close eye on the elections is far-right leader Marine Le Pen. Le Pen was Macron's opponent for the presidential elections. Now she may just end up being kingmaker. The far-right has only 8 seats in the outgoing assembly. They are expected to increase their tally. In the event of a hung assembly, Le Pen's party could decide who controls parliament. Macron will be hoping to avoid both scenarios. For that, his coalition needs to cross the 289-seat mark. This makes today's contest one that will truly decide his fate.
Le choix que vous aurez à faire ce dimanche 19 juin est plus crucial que jamais.
Well, for more on this, our correspondent Ross Cullen is joining us live from Paris. Ross Cullen, good to see you. When will we start receiving the results, or when will they be made public?
We expect the results shortly after polls close at 8 p.m. local time here in France. The turnout so far today has actually been slightly higher than last week, Sunday the 12th of June, the first round of this general election for all 577 French MPs, the MPs in the National Assembly, the lower house of Parliament here in France. You're right that 289 is the magic number. That's the number of MPs you need to get a majority in the lower house. But it looks as though, going by the situation that we have seen in the first round and the polls leading up to this second and final decisive round, that we could be seeing a situation where one party, like Emmanuel Macron's En Marche, along with its allies, might be the biggest party, but they may not be able to breach that line of getting a majority. And so that brings into play parties like the centre-right Les Républicains, a famous party of previous presidents Jacques Chirac and Nicolas Sarkozy. They are more likely to play the role of kingmaker as opposed to Marine Le Pen. Her party was looking to increase its seats in Parliament, but maybe only getting as many as 20 or 30 MPs, not enough to be able to be playing the crowning role if there is a hung Parliament, and there needs to be all sorts of coalition deals put into place. But at the moment, you're right that the two leading forces at play in this election are the President's Party and its allies and the super coalition on the left, which is a combination of the Communists, the Socialists, the Greens and the far left France Unbowed.
Ross, going with what you're saying, President Macron seems to have an upper hand in these polls, despite critics saying that his majority could be facing a risk. What are the predictions so far?
The cohabitation is an interesting one to talk about because we've only seen that 3 times previously. in French political history when you have a president and a prime minister coming from opposing sides of the political spectrum. So, for example, in the past, socialist, left-leaning prime minister working with a centre-right, a conservative president. The situation as it could be this time round is something that Jean-Luc Mélenchon has called for. The leader of that left-wing union we were talking about previously, with the left and Greens coming together to field only one candidate in each constituency. He, the leader of that coalition, has said, I am on track to be Prime Minister. If you vote us in to be the biggest party, President Emmanuel Macron, France's centrist leader, will have no other option than to appoint me, the far-left leader, as his Prime Minister, having to work together or to cohabit, as the French political term is. So we're going to be seeing from 8 p.m. onwards tonight, French local time, the results which will be allowing Emmanuel Macron a majority to be able to pass his legislative reforms, or will be denying him that majority, meaning there is much more capacity for the opposition to block and delay his priorities.
Live from Paris, our correspondent Ross Cullen, thank you very much for that. And let's keep talking about this French election. And joining us live also from Paris is Elijah, who is a veteran war correspondent and analyst. Elijah, good to see you and welcome to WION.
Thank you for having me.
What are the NUP's or Mélenchon's chances in these elections?
Well, actually, Jean-Luc Mélenchon said he just waiting for Emmanuel Macron on Monday to call him to nominate him a prime minister. I think that's a bit ambitious. However, he only needs 180 MPs to question the government of Emmanuel Macron and make his life very difficult, particularly on a domestic and international affair, i.e. the relationship with the EU and the relationship with the Americans and Russia, of course. So I don't think these next 5 years, Emmanuel Macron will have it easy, because he had 5 years of free questioning. He was the kingmaker. He decided over everything. He had no questioning from the General Assembly, and now he's not going to have it his way in the next 5 years. And particularly because of that reason, people, even who are not with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, are voting for him because they want to create an equilibrium that was lacking in France for 5 years.
Elijah, let's talk about the ifs. Both Macron and Mélenchon have divergent views and policies, like we've seen. If the NUP's coalition wins and Jean-Luc becomes prime minister, how do you foresee the working relations between the two foes?
I think the cohabitation between the two parts is going to be very difficult, as it was between Jacques Chirac and Léonid Jospin in 2002, because they both have different views. One is capitalist, another one is socialist. The view toward the international countries is huge, and the difference toward the domestic affair, particularly imposing taxes on rich people and creating raising minimum wage of 15% and the retirement. These are big issues that Emmanuel Macron is accusing Mélenchon of not having a solution, just throwing big titles that are not practically feasible on the ground, particularly after the war in Ukraine, and the consequences on petrol and inflation and the food security that has been jeopardized for the last 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Elijah, finally, for the benefit of our viewers, could you explain the scenarios in the event of a hung assembly?
I think what's going to happen tonight is we're going to have a result where Emmanuel Macron will have to create a coalition not with the far right. He's going to go to the traditional Republican, because these are the ones who normally occupy the National Assembly, which is completely different from the presidential election, where he was neck and neck with the far right wing Marine Le Pen. So it's not going to happen, but I think Mélenchon is going to get between 200 and 250, and Macron is going to get between 250 and 300. So he will prevail over Jean-Luc Mélenchon, but he cannot ignore him at the National Assembly, and it's going to be very tough for Macron to survive in the next 5 years.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.